People who got fired for the stupidest reason. What happened? I was driving cars for a shady dealer. Under the table, while I was laid off from my real job, got a call that my uncle had attempted suicide and was in a psychiatric ward in a local hospital and wouldn't talk to anybody else but me. Told boss I had to roll. He said something like, your job comes before family. If you leave, don't come back. I left the next morning. He called and asked me why I wasn't at work. I hung up on him. I once worked for a small private school. A new supervisor was hired, and she called an after hours meeting the Wednesday night right before Thanksgiving. One teacher didn't attend, and she was fired. When the new supervisor was finally let go, I heard from the owner that they had 4 lawsuits from employees being wrongfully fired. Didn't wear a tie that I was never given. I was supposed to have a black tie as part of my security uniform. They never gave me a tie and told me not to worry about it. I worked nights anyway. Then some exec did a walkthrough and saw I wasn't wearing a tie and told them to get rid of me, and I was out on my ass. Thought of another one. This would have been one of my first jobs that I didn't even get a chance to start. I applied to be a deckhand on a local ferry, went through unpaid training as part of the interview process. First aid, CPR, crisis management, safety policy whatnots, all group interviews. Anyway, I got the job after about a week. I also got my offer in writing with the expected start date. That was going to be a Tuesday 2 weeks later, and I remember this detail because it went to shit. I accept and sign and take my copy. I was thrilled. I was going to be on the water and making money for the summer. My friends were hanging out down by the water when I left the interview, so I went and told them all about it and the start date, etc. Again, cementing that start date in my mind, so I was ready. The following week, a week before I was supposed to start, I got a call from the office asking where I was. We expected you to be here an hour ago, and so on. I asked them to check the offer that I had signed because I was never told that my start date had changed. I mean, I was available and explained that I'd be happy to come down right away, but I hadn't known of any changes. They checked, agreed that they had made the mistake, and then told me that, nevertheless, a miscommunication this early on was a bad sign and they would not be hiring me. So I was let go because someone put down the wrong date. I broke my hand and got fired for asking to take a day off to go to the doctor. I never called in there once in the 5 years I worked there. Accepted job and notified them I would need X date off for my sister's wedding 2 months after the start date. Came back from my sister's wedding and shit hit the fan while I was gone. Not my responsibility, but my name was on some of the changes in the document. Canned that day for not being there when they needed me. Someone was stealing from the register. I got blamed. Turned out to be the owner's brother who blamed it on me. I was let go just before Thanksgiving. I never got my job back, but the owner did apologize months later. My wife got fired once for giving a high-level donor she worked for an art gallery a bottle of water at a big dinner and art auction. Her boss had insisted that there be no water at the event, but when the donor asked for water, my wife went and found some damn water. Boss found out and fired her the next day for insubordination. I brought my own box cutter to work at a temp job I had worked for 2 days already because they refused to replace the blades in their box cutters, and got fired because it looked like a knife. Back in the day, I had a part-time job at a convenience store. The manager was swapping out franchise branded coffee grounds for Costco coffee to save money as he got a bonus based on store profitability. I knew, but didn't care. He wasn't robbing me, and let's be realistic. Costco probably provided better coffee grounds. When he got caught and fired by the corporate owner, he phoned me up and fired me on the assumption I sold him out. Not sure that someone who no longer has a job could fire me, but I didn't care as I had given my notice to the assistant manager a few hours earlier that I would be quitting in a week or earlier if they found someone. I was able to collect a 2-week severance payment instead. This happened over 20 years ago at a medical insurance company. I didn't sue them, mostly because I was young and just didn't know that could be a thing. I'd do it again. I wasn't looking for kudos, someone needed help, so I did what was needed. I didn't have any idea that it was against company policy. We certainly didn't cover it in my training class. Oh, and the lady didn't call her insurance company instead of 911. We were trying to solve an issue with one of her claims. I came back to her having an emergency after I'd had her on hold. I worked in a customer service call center for an insurance company. A customer called in and had a medical emergency, probably a heart attack, but I'm not sure. While I was on the phone with her, I used the phone in the empty cubicle next to me to call 911 and stayed on both lines to be sure that EMS got to her. I was fired because AI took too long on calls already, and this was exceptionally long. B, I made an unauthorized outgoing call, and C, I gave the customer's personal information, name and address out to the 911 operator. Guy preparing to retire, who had been training me to take over his job for the past 7 months, felt I was ready to take over completely. Boss was afraid to lose 30+ years of experience and fired me to keep the old guy for a little longer. From what I understand, there was a pretty big fight. Old guy was a wonderful reference for me with the new job I obtained, with a 20k pay raise, and begrudgingly agreed to stay on for another year. Supposedly, I argued with the owner's wife about working weekends. I specifically told them I can work weekends, but cannot work in a time with less than a day's notice. I'm not at your beck and call for 8 an hour. Duck me right. I was fired for accidentally showing up for a shift I was not scheduled for and then leaving when I found out I was not scheduled for said shift. Got fired from a public library for taking 2 carts to collect books from the outside drop box instead of 1. The past few times I emptied the drop box on a Monday, it required 2 trips, so I brought 2 carts instead. It turns out the matter of how many carts were used in emptying the drop box was a matter of a library board vote, and I was in violation of a town ordinance. Mind you, I wasn't fired. I was placed on paid administrative leave pending a library board inquiry at which I was welcome to call witnesses. I couldn't keep a straight face, so I resigned. I was fired for playing solitaire on my 15-minute break when I was working as a receptionist. The doctor who owned the clinic was dumb enough to put that as the reason in my termination letter. I collected unemployment after he tried to appeal it. They explained in great detail how stupid of a reason this was for termination. The schedule was hanging off the wall, and it was magnetized. Every own's names were little magnets. Someone knocked it off the wall and thought they'd put the magnets back in the right places. Naturally, I didn't show up for my shift. I was fired the next day, even after it came to light what happened, because I should know what my shifts were. Man. During my senior year in high school, I was working at McDonald's. It was right after Christmas and we were really busy. I'd been there 4 hours. Had 2 to go. Was supposed to get a 30-minute break. Since we'd slowed down, I asked if I could have a break. The shift manager said no one was getting breaks. I said thanks a lot. She told the assistant manager, pretty sure they were sleeping together, that I told her to duck off. He fired me on the spot. Wouldn't even let me give my side of the story. A week later I was working at Jack in the Box. Was a shift manager in 6 months. Did that through a couple years of college. Dropped out, never wanted to go anyway, and moved up to assistant manager, and then a couple years later, general manager. I remembered how shitty I was treated at McDonald's, and made sure I treated my employees well. Had the 3rd lowest turnover rate in a 95 restaurant region. Had the 2nd highest average hourly pay, and 2 in profit improvement. Take care of your people, and they'll do the same for you. My first job ever was as a dishwasher. I was so proud. I was 18. Of course. My parents didn't believe me, so my mom called them and asked them if it was true. They fired me that night because they felt I was unreliable. I have yet to let my folks live that one down. I got a middle-level position at the company where they boasted at how family-orientated they are. They are the kind of company that has a small arcade and putt-putt and ping pong table and encouraged people to relax and play them. After a month of being there, I decided to play some co-workers in ping pong since I'm pretty decent at it. The owner and his son ends up walking through the doors and sees me playing and challenges me. I play the son and absolutely demolish him. He got extremely upset and walked away after throwing the paddle at me. Later that week I was fired for not fitting the culture. Cool. I had pneumonia and I couldn't even talk, lost voice, so I asked my mom to call my boss to tell her I was severely sick and couldn't come to work. She called me the next day saying I shouldn't rely on my mommy to call in for me when I'm sick and that I was fired for blowing a shift. I was a hostess at a restaurant and was in grade 10 LOL. I got fired from Sonic when I told them I was no longer going to be available for last minute call-ins because I'd gotten a second job. My boss was not happy because I lived the closest, so he stormed off and started screaming. Guess this is professional March 54 feet's last day. I hope you're happy. I tried to clarify that I'd still be available for set shifts. I just wouldn't be on call anymore. He screamed at me to shut up. I hadn't clocked in yet and I could sense a tantrum, so I asked if I should even bother clocking in. He threw a burger at me and told me to get the duck out, so I did. They had a drive-through line wrapped around the building, and I was the only non-family employee on until 3. I got fired from my first ever job as a sit counselor in training at the summer day camp I went to every year as a kid. I was given the 6-7-year-olds. One of them asked me if I had a girlfriend and girls are gross. Why would you do that sort of way? And I said yes. He asked me if I ever kiss her and I said yes in a fun horror movie voice manner. He was like, "Who? Gross." We all had a laugh. I thought it was a fun exchange. Well, I guess the kid went home and told his mom that night and she freaked out. Demanded I be fired for teaching her child about sex and giving details of my sex life to her child. I was 13. All I said was that I kissed a girl. The camp fired me right there. I had no idea what I said was out of line. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.